Go.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Lula Lounge. It's the final day of Block Slavic Music Meet. I'm gonna pass it off to Michael in a second to do the introduction for our next paddle. Exactly. My voice is completely toast, but that in itself feels really, really good that it's toast. Um, I just wanted to say thank you, everybody here. It's such an amazing, intimate group of people. I know when I talk to a lot of people who are starting off festivals or conferences, everyone kind of always remembers that first one when it was a bunch of people in a room just enjoying in each other's company and enjoying in the thing that we're all passionate about, which is music, which is live music. So the thing that of course I'm so stoked about all the time is Eastern European music. Is why we created Block Slavic Music Meet. But it's not only about that. That's the thing that I'm passionate about. But really, it's about bringing people together in that impetus to then just talk about live music, to talk about culture. And so but thank you. That's it. Thank you. Also like a sucker for cymbals, and so I wanted to put this up on stage here because this is part of an old tradition, a Ukrainian tradition, for those of you who are around to sort of hear us explain it on stage through the videos. It's a wedding tree. It's a tree that generally is a branch that's given by one family to another to symbolize those families coming together, and everybody ties the ribbons on the tree. And for me, it means a lot here in this context because it's a thing that starts off as just a barren, dead branch that has no form of life. Sometimes now in this last year or 2 years, we've definitely all felt that barrenness at one point or another. But when we do what we do and we bring people together, it can become something beautiful and colorful and crazy. And this is something that y'all do in all of your work every single day. This to me represents that, and I want to thank y'all for making this. Thank you. So now I'm going to pass it off to Michael. He's going to introduce this panel. Nikki's going to introduce the panel. All right, here we go.
Hello. I'm very excited to be sharing a bold lip indoors for the first time in 18 months. So thanks for the opportunity. My name is Nicole Rochford. I'm the owner, founder of AIM Artists in Motion, a booking agency that's based here in Toronto. I am your moderator for today. And this panel is being presented by Folk Alliance International. So I want to say a big thanks to FAI and also let everybody know that they are currently open with submissions for an official showcase at FAI, which is going to be done in a hybrid form for February of 2022. And showcase submissions are now up and running, and they close September 30th, $40 US to apply. So I encourage everyone to check that out. If you haven't been, 2022 is going to be a great year because you will have the opportunity to be with them virtually if you're unable to make the trip down to Kansas City, Missouri, to be there in person. So, beyond folk. I'm not even going to ask what the term folk means to anybody. We're just going to roll right into this. I am younger than two of the festivals that are being represented here on stage today. I won't share my age, but I will share that Carrie Clark comes to us from the Calgary Folk Festival, which was established in 1980, and they'll be celebrating their 42nd year in 2022. Then we have Peter Kankura, who is with the Ottawa Jazz Festival, also established in 1980, celebrating their 42nd year in 2022. And Sam Bajel of Hillside Music Festival in Guelph, Ontario, established 1984, so 38th year in 2022. Something was in the water in the 80s. A lot of good festivals cropping up in the 80s. So yeah, that's who we have today. Would any of you like to do your own introductions so that I don't mess it up? Because I'm going to go right into the questions. All right. They have a lot to share. They're like, no, we've got bios on the website. Plus, I suspect that everybody here has already gone through the delegate list and already knows their many accomplishments as programmers for these festivals. So today I'm going to be using the term programmer. I'm also going to be using the term artistic director, or AD, and using those interchangeably. So I just want to preface that before we go in. So my first question, given we've established when the festivals started, I want to know from each of you how long you've been in the position of artistic director at your festival. So Carrie, could you kick us off?
Since dinosaurs roamed the earth.
There are people here who remember the 80s. It wasn't that long ago.
Over 25 years I've been at the festival for a long time. But my role changed and the festival has changed, but I've been there a long time. I don't quit things very easily.
Okay, and as artistic director for the festival, how many years in that position?
Well, see, this is where it gets complex and we only have so much time. But basically, I was artistic director from the beginning, and then our festival lost a ton of money, and Terry Wickett from the Institute Folk Fest came in as our producer, so then I was assistant producer and then associate producer, and then I became artistic director again, and I have been since 2005, and now I'm artistic and marketing director because I've taken marketing over. So I've always been involved with the programming, but how much autonomy I had and how much say I had in curation has changed with those different titles. But since 2005, I've had the full autonomy of the curation.
I think it's amazing that you're doing more than, quote, just programming. Like, you have a really in-depth understanding about all these different levels of what it takes to run a successful festival. So, you know, there's the programming part, and then there's everything else that it takes to run a festival. Peter, same question to you. How long have you been artistic director at Ottawa Jazz?
Mine's much simpler. 10 years.
10 years? Sam?
Basically since about 1998.
98. Okay, so everyone's had a good chunk of time, say decade plus in their position. So if you're a musician, after a decade, you're an overnight success.
I'm just going to say one thing. I never signed up for that. I just said I'd help book a few bands. That's how it started.
Okay. Do we want the origin story of like how you came into that position?
Yeah.
No? Okay. So you've all taken the role over from someone previously. So is your programming significantly different from your predecessor, and how?
I started last time, so I don't want to start this time. So let's start with Sam.
We'll go back and forth.
So, I mean, the Hillside Festival was never really had an artistic director properly. And I mean, I'm not joking when I say that, you know, I never really signed up to be anything with the term director in it. You know, very anti-director in general. But the festival used to be, and I was part of it. I did start off on the festival on the committee. The board, because I was booking music for the university, so they said, hey, maybe you might be interested in coming and checking this out. And it's like, oh, okay. But it was a committee, and I was on this committee. I'll just say that booking a festival with a committee is a very interesting thing. And then you got the poor guy that's like, you know, responsible for like listening to what the committee tells. Says, you go book this. And, you know, this is what you got to do. Like somebody's acting in the role as the actual putting pen to paper, but they're not part of the actual process of deciding. So you know, that was the way it was being done, and yeah. So when I started it, all I really said was, you know, the festival has always been programmed in a very diverse way right from the beginning. It was never really a folk festival, so it was just more like, you know, taking into account that we were part of the Southern Ontario marketplace. You live in Guelph, I mean, you're affected by the Toronto market and everything, right? Even back then, before there was like, you know, all kinds of things calling themselves festivals popping up all over the place. But yeah, so we just talked about it, like we needed to kind of like look ahead a bit more, and a lot of like planning ahead for younger audiences, that was a big thing. It's just like, you know, I just said something like, you know, some of the stuff might not go over so well with some of the older crowd because we have to plan ahead. And that's kind of been the way it's gone.
Yeah, and I would say that that's probably a significant change in terms of your voice leading, you know, that direction for the festival. Peter, what about you? You came in and the festival had been long established. You've been there 10 years. How's your programming different, significantly different perhaps from your predecessor?
Well, the first thing I thought of is the fact that every time I kind of get a chance to do this, I like to talk to, we talked about this a lot actually yesterday about autonomy and programming and how every festival just has its own configuration based on how long it's been around, based on the board, based on, it's a people project, right? And so, unlike all the others, I have a unique kind of situation. I took over from Shocking, who was who established the Ottawa Jazz Festival, and he basically was retiring. And then I also worked with Catherine O'Grady, who's the executive director. And when Jacques was retiring, it was basically over a number of years, as he retired in his late 70s. So it was just taking less on and less on. And Catherine was doing more and more of the programming. So when I came in, she was doing most of it, but needed to actually give it over to somebody. But because of the way it started, I feel like we actually share and we do this kind of together in a way, even though it's my responsibility and my main thing. So that's kind of the situation. And I came in there as a musician. I'm a musician, and the way I got in is I used to live in Ottawa, and then I moved to Boston, and then spent a lot of time in New York. And during that time when I was playing, I pitched a few projects to the festival. I did I toured a lot of folk festivals, and I really liked the idea of folk festival workshops. And I noticed that no jazz festivals do that, so that was my first idea. Was, hey, let me do this. And they did, and then it was successful. Next year I did a little more, and it was successful. And then when came time to actually apply or the job came up, I got it.
So your time on the road as a musician and being able to experience other festivals across Canada really was able to inform how you wanted to lead to make some decisions and the landscape of your festival.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And Carrie, what about yourself? I mean, you've alluded to the fact that you were programming and then you were not programming, and then you were programming. So how would you say that your programming was different or significantly different from your predecessor?
Well, my predecessor was a volunteer. It was a very small festival. There were only one staff, and when I first was started, we had one half staff. I was the half staff. So, I mean, it's in that context. I mean, the festival was only 15 years old, and it had gone through different successes and failures. And I think my programming and evolution of what was called folk music kind of coincided. But I come from a campus radio background, so I'm a punk rock girl, and indie rock, and avant jazz, and so I brought a lot of that there. But I think that Calgary's a very young city, a very young population, and the campus radio station does really well. And so I think that the edgier and indie sort of programming that I did, and a lot of world music, and I like to say I kind of program on the edges. Terry Wicken, when he was involved in programming, I feel like he programs in the middle and I program on the edges, and so I kind of brought that, I think. But I think it kind of worked with the ecology of Calgary. I feel like if I was programming in Canmore or a small town, I'd be wildly unsuccessful. Like, it would be too weird for people. Like, I feel like the kind of aesthetic I have and my background fits with the city of Calgary. I probably would work in other big cities in Canada, but I don't think it would work like in a small town. So it was maybe less folky, but I really love singer-songwriters. So to me, you know, it's always based on songwriting and really good songwriters, but they could be delivering in a hip-hop kind of way. Or it's based on musical traditions and the evolution of it. So that's what makes us folk. And so even you might see something that seems wild and crazy, but really when you look at it, there's a history, like a root of that music that exists, whether it's from the Ukrainian culture or an African culture or Colombian. So I guess I brought that, but I brought like that sort of really independent aesthetic. And I always said if I booked all the music I liked, then we'd have 200 people coming a day instead of 12,000. because my tastes are pretty obscure. So it's, I don't know, I programmed different than my predecessor, but also the situation was different. He was a volunteer, he came from much more of a traditional folk kind of background. And I programmed differently than Terry, who was in charge of programming, but I worked with him. So I've always been involved with programming, I just didn't have the fun of saying who was booked when Terry was there. So, but each, I think, festival, if ideally, it kind of fits the nature of its city and its location and its people. And but it's always, you know, like if someone else came in and did programming, and they will one day, because there's a best before date stamp on my back that I can't see, thankfully. If someone else came in, they would hire different people. You know, there's just like none of us, all of us have tastes. We're all, you know, have different leanings, and so other people may be programmed that haven't been programmed, and it would be different.
Yeah. Thank you. And you know, it's such a nice segue because you know, Hillside was established 38 years ago. I feel like we like to put things into boxes and identify them with genres and descriptions. I mean, Hillside was created as a music festival, and to this day it's been known as a very eclectic lineup of music. Like you never really know what you're going to see because you can see a little bit of everything when you go to Hillside. And then, you know, we have Ottawa Jazz, so we've got jazz in the title. There's a preconceived notion of like, I know what I'm going to see, but in 2019, you programmed Chicago, The Roots, and Lee Fields as your headline artists, right? Not necessarily artists that pop into your mind when you think of Jazz Fest. And in 2019, Carrie had Sheila E., Lucius, and the Strombellas on her main stage. So again, Calgary Folk Festival, and here are artists that definitely go beyond that definition of what folk is. So let me ask you, do you think it's necessary to include a music genre in a festival's name these days? And would you even consider removing the genre from your festival's name?
Let's start with Peter.
Yeah, sure, I can start this time. You know, it's a conversation actually we have somewhat often about this. And I mean, if I had my say, I would call it like a creative music festival. That's what I would love to do with the festival, is just to, you know, just to go a little bit about, to add to what Carrie was saying. You know, like personally, I just feel like the music we program has to be kind of have some sense of authenticity and feel connected. And it can be so complicated as to how it's going to connect it that it's hard to describe. But I often have to have these conversations with staff sometimes when they come in, they're fairly new, and they're like, why aren't you booking what I think is good? Why are you booking this? And so we kind of have to carefully have this conversation about, well, I'm not perfect, but I do have certain tastes, and I think this is, Ottawa has, this will do well in Ottawa, we kind of know that, and also this is, the festival's 40 years old, and there's a certain amount of series that have been, we have this improv series at the National Arts Center at a 150-seat venue, which is kind of the backbone of what I love about the festival. It's all the creative stuff from all over the world, and that's the most dearest thing for me to book. But what was the question again? Change the name. Yeah.
Well, the broader question is, you know, do you think festivals today need a musical genre in their title, or you know, and would you consider changing your festival's name?
I mean, so at this point, to get down to that, at this point, no, it's definitely a jazz festival. And even though the names that you listed, they are the original sort of model that we still function on is that those headliners allow a lot of people to come into the park. They used to financially make a lot of money. That would help fund all the cool stuff, all the 12 other stages. They allow for bigger sponsorships and more grants, all of which help subsidize like 95% of the festival's cool stuff. I'm not sure that model is going to live for very long, at least not the way it's in Ottawa, just because of the way the finances work. So I don't see the main stage as the heart of the festival. we're still careful about it, but we're so at the mercy of who's on the road, how can we wrap this, how many other festivals, or how much money you have. So even though that's the main stage tends to be the face of the festival, it's definitely not the heart.
Carrie, what about you? I mean, you already mentioned you come in with like personal tastes that are definitely maybe fringe to what that term folk would require or imply. So, do you think it's still necessary? Like, is it the Calgary Folk Fest?
It's kind of old school, right? Like, it's kind of boring. Like, Calgary Folk Music Festival, Winnipeg Folk Festival. It is kind of
It's of an era.
And I mean, it is, people say, what's folk? And I mean, for us, now there's the Bonnaroos and the Coachellas, and we have Sled Island in Calgary. What's a Sled Island? Like, there's much more creative names up for it. And so, yeah, it's come up before. The Calgary Music Festival is boring too. I guess for us, it's about, for now, keeping it because it means something to us. It's really folk, I say to people, is more about how people behave and the atmosphere than it is about the music. So it's about people coming together. It's about being very egalitarian, not having VIP areas. People can set up their tarps and blankets on the grass. It's multi-generational. That's what folk means to us. And so once people come in and they see that, then it means something. And it's weird because some of the new generation, like, we could have a whole conversation about this, but I just discovered that this music called R&B, and I can't believe that it's R&B. It's not what I think was R&B. I asked there was the Mount Royal kids doing a study, a marketing study, and some of them had been, some hadn't, and I said, why haven't you come? Well, they didn't think they liked folk music. But some people might think, oh, I don't like folk music. I love Great Lake Swimmers. Well, Great Lake Swimmers to me are a folk band. But then there's these, so what kind of music do you like? They like R&B and hip hop. Oh, really? And it turns out, you probably all know this, I'm old, but that on the radio, all the mainstream radio, it's all R&B. And I asked my cousin, and he said, oh, it's if you're writing songs and singing them. And I'm like, that's R&B? And basically, to me, it's sort of wimpy shit. And it's not Ruth Brown, and it's not Winoni Harris, and there's no rhythm, and there's no blues. And it's called R&B.
So it's kind of like what we're doing, folk sometimes is like that, four-letter F word. And some artists are really afraid to call themselves folk because it means something, so now they're using terms like roots and Americana. So like R&B is the new pop, is what we're saying.
That's what it is,
right?
Apparently, yes. It's
Okay.
crap.
Good to know. I learned something.
Well, I really don't know what I'm talking about, but this is what I've heard. But so folk is kind of like that, where R&B doesn't really mean rhythm and blues, and folk is, and we, in our descriptions, it's like, roots, indie, funk, folk, bluegrass. But then there's all these new genres that, like, that I can't keep track of. And so sometimes, like when we do the descriptions, then we'll, put these descriptors in. And one time, my significant other saw those, and we put it together, all these words together. We put it on the back of a T-shirt. And actually, at the time when Jean was hosting Q, he listed it was like the most blah blah blah. Because it's like, swamp, blah, all these different categories. Yeah. So that's the long answer to it. Right now, it's sticking. Like unless there's something better, or we come up with a weird title that doesn't have any genres in the name, because as you know, like the Ottawa Blues Fest, they have heavy metal, they have it's not really blues. So right now, it's because in the West, the folk music festivals have a certain format and feel and vibe and all tiers and all that. That right now it makes sense to keep it, and I don't think taking folk out is going to sell us necessarily more tickets, but people will see the names, and like we had Thievery Corporation one year. I mean, people see that name and go, maybe I'll go. But sometimes it does keep people away. They think, I don't like that thing. And then when people come, they say, I have no idea. So.
And it's interesting because when I hear the word folk, I immediately think people. When I hear people, I think community. And so for anyone here who hasn't been to any of these festivals, you really are kind of, you're entering a different world that weekend or even that day that you attend. So not to take away from the music, I know this is a music-centered conference, but I find that when I enter one of these festivals, I really am teleported to like a very special place of community or like-minded people, regardless of what the lineup is. And that's certainly how I've always been, I've always shared, like, oh, you should go to a folk festival, the experience. Very seldom does someone necessarily mention the headliners, although there are draws and maybe a reason going. Festival really is about an experience. I'm actually getting like chills. I'm impressing myself so much now. as the experience of going to a festival, and I truly miss that experience too. But could you share with our crowd here what other experiences are offered for a festival attendee outside of just like that headline artist or even the musical lineup? What other experiences can someone have at your festival? So there are workshops, there's side stages. You know, I know there's a lot of curation that goes behind the fan experience. The fan experience is certainly something that people, whether they're programmers or performers, should be keeping in mind. So you all do it really well. I just want you to brag.
Hillside has a #1.
Yeah, I want you to brag a little bit about your fan experience.
Tantric sex workshops.
Just do a little bragging about what else is at the festival other than music.
Three candy shoe workshop. No, there's like a lot of stuff. Like, I mean, Hillside calls itself actually Hillside Community Festival. That's the real incorporated name, Hillside. Hillside Community Festival of Wealth. And I mean, I'm just going to go back to this term community because you know it's a really delicate term because there's a fine line between community and clique. And so the community thing is like the community without borders. It doesn't like end at your certain zip code or postal code or something like that. So you know, as long as you got an environment that's open to having people come in who respect your vibe and you know treat the land and everything with respect and each other, then they're part of your community. You know, like most of our audience needs to check their taste at their gate. You know, they're like not really coming to see. Sure, they come to see certain artists, but I mean, it's like a lot of the unfamiliar stuff. So, and then there's this thing that happens like off the stage, and so when you don't want to go see music, you can go and hang out with people. I mean, there's a social element, a huge social element for festivals like this, like ours. I'll use the folk. We're talking about the term folk. So the folk festival model is what all these festivals are based on. And Hillside is one of them. I mean, Mariposa goes back to that whole concept of having a gathering where you've got more than just music taking place. And it's not about just like focus on band X and that's it, you know. So yeah, we have, you know, workshops that are involving everything from healing arts to, you know, yoga, this and that. And, you know, we've got a spoken word area like Carrie has that too. But yeah, I mean, there's just like children's area, you know. The food pavilion is more popular than anything. Like the International Food Pavilion is probably one of the biggest draws of the festival. So without any of those things, it wouldn't be the same. It's not just a bunch of bands in a field, you know. So
yeah, no, I've been to your festival multiple times and can't wait to return. Peter, how's yours different? It's not the traditional folk model per se, but you're doing a lot of work to integrate community and audience in just outside of that main stage platform and programming. What else does the festival bring to City of Ottawa and attendees?
Well, I mean, I have to say I always loved the Canadian folk festivals. I kind of grew up playing them in a way.
Yeah, they really influenced your position where you are right now in terms of taking that bigger picture and blending things up.
Yes. However, I will say that I also very quickly realized that the jazz world is totally different. And by jazz world, I mean I'm quite involved in the Jazz Festivals Canada network. And pretty much all those festivals, for whatever reason, have for decades have been set up quite different than folk festivals. So most of the festivals run between 7, 8, 10 to 14 days. We've had festivals that are 14 days long with full programming every day. So it's a whole different kind of experience. We get almost 140, 150 different bands playing at the festival. So that's pretty cool. It's a different experience than the folk thing for sure. You can really customize and choose what you want to go see, and we take really a lot of care in creating series so that you can sort of bounce between those series, right? if some band's coming and I know that drummer's work with that person, we'll create all these collaborations. So there's lots of that kind of goes within that structure.
A lot of behind the scenes thinking and molding of you. I can see your brain like working right now, like looking at like all the different spots and ways that you can enhance when you invite someone to that festival. Like what else can they be contributing to?
Exactly. And then you can, that band we can do like a matinee show, or I really like involving our local musicians and getting them to work with musicians from elsewhere. That's been a real kind of big focus of these collaborations.
And Carrie, I've never been to the Calgary Folk Festival. It's like pretty high on the to-do list, especially in a post-pandemic world. What are some of the offerings that the festival has outside of like that main stage or maybe the music that it's known for?
Yeah, well, I mean, the music is a huge part of it for sure. I mean, we've got crafts and food and all that stuff. Our collaborative sessions, it is a very folk festival model that started in Mariposa, but they were more sort of teaching. And we have 39 collaborative sessions over the 4 days, which is actually quite a lot. And that's something I'm really proud of, their music, but we throw people together according to different styles and themes, some of them very loose, but you might have 16 people on stage who have never met each other, both 4 different bands maybe, and they're all lined up, space about this big behind each other, and it's how, sometimes people in their bios will say, oh, I share the stage with, but really that's like being in the same grocery lineup as, right? You're not actually sharing a stage. So, like, Jeff Berner was actually shared a stage with Billy Bragg. So Billy Bragg sitting there doing a song, and then Jeff Berner. They actually went on tour together after that because they actually do meet and play. When you see Melvin Gibbs all of a sudden is playing bass with John Langford, and like I think they're the same people, only one's black and one's white, and one does country and the other does funk. But it's like wow, they just John asked me to. So here's Melvin, he just picks his bass up when John's song's on and come on, and people have met and collaborated and. Mary Gauthier and Jim White on an album together, and the local artists, Mariel Buckley playing with Leanne Womack, and it actually makes a difference. So those things are super magical, so you don't know what's going to happen. The sound isn't perfect, someone's guitar might not be on, but it's magical, and we love that. So there's that, and then probably about 10 years ago, we set up the Talk Tent, and so it's not dissimilar from what maybe even some of the commercial big festivals do, but basically it was another roadside attraction with like spoken word and comedy and some talks and those kinds of things. Richard Clohill's done his Road Stories one in there, and that's super fun. We did a couple other fun things. We had a theater group that did like one-on-one theater, very multicultural kind of, and we had a sound igloo one time where you could go in and do this different sound. We had this guy set up all these speakers, and so we've done things like that, used our site a little bit. Our site is fairly compact, so we don't have a ton of room for that. Like Winnipeg, who's not Chris's left town, but Winnipeg's site is amazing because they have a lot of art that they commission because they have so much space for that. And we've had some performers, in the kids area. We have some theatery performers and some dance, but music is a huge focus. But yeah, because there's 8 different stages, 6 during the day. There's a lot to wander around and see, and you kind of happen upon things, I think, when it's in a big outdoor space. And then, yeah, like Sam said, it's about community of people getting together and see each other and spending time hanging out on the grass and you can have a lot of different kinds of experiences. But definitely musical discovery is huge and important to us.
So let me ask, are your festivals programming traditional folk music? So, this showcase festival conference that we've been doing here has definitely been inspired by cultures, backgrounds, and tradition, done in some really new, exciting contemporary ways. Bringing it back to that more like a traditional folk, are you able to program that type of music or that type of style and bringing these cultural ambassadors in the moment to the festival? Like, what does that look like? Like Peter, like at a jazz festival, where could I find a traditional folk ensemble performing, and how is that regarded by like community and ticket holders? Is it something so new, or is that a long-established tradition at your festival?
We've had Lemon Bucket a number of times, for example. I think it fits in really well. We had Dr. Broca a couple of years ago as well. And there's a whole bunch of folks I'm working with right now that are from different traditions. I think people respond to it really well. I don't know, it's strong, authentic music. It's hard to, like, we could be here kind of for hours talking about what's jazz and what is folk and what it all means. But, you know, I kind of feel like we have this late night stage, for example, and I'm like, that's got to be fun. You got to get goosebumps on the back of your neck, and that could be one night it could be Bill Frisell playing to a silent film, and the next night it could be Lemon Bucket, you know, and the next night it could be Jerry Douglas. We had Jerry Douglas play bluegrass, and and then the night after it could be a swing dance. You know, so it fits everywhere.
Yeah.
It's got to fit you I mean, I think that's part of my job is understanding what stages we have, and where it fit in. That's how I think of it. If I meet someone like, oh, man, I totally, this fits here. And sometimes I'm like, this is so cool, I have no idea where it fits.
But I think it's important because I think sometimes artists will sometimes see folk festival in the title, jazz festival in the title, and then you kind of think, oh, I'm not meant to be there, right? Maybe you don't do your research, right? And you don't actually look at that lineup or past lineups. So it's really encouraging to hear that you're all presenting eclectic lineups of talent, that you're all open to presenting what you think is going to be a really fantastic opportunity for your community, for the artists in that one particular year. And so just a plug to artists, like, don't let the title fool you, right? Like, do a little bit of that research to see who's been on the lineup, because here we have 3 different types of festivals, and yet they're all approaching it with an extremely, open ear, open mind way of looking at what is going to be best for that one curation of one in the year. So, out of curiosity, what's your favorite way of discovering new music or artists who are considered?
One thing I was going to say to the traditional things, there's so many overlaps between different traditions. Like, there's similarities in sounds for Irish traditional music to Galician and to Ukrainian, and so that's some of the things that I love, and especially in our collaborative sessions, you can put an Iranian band on stage with a Celtic band, and they can have linkages. And like for me, I don't really book much sort of Chicago or modern blues. I more book like Delta and more traditional blues. And I like some of that. I love what you say about authenticity. So a lot of it is based on traditions. Where you have, we probably all know So-Called. I don't know if you know So-Called from Ottawa. He's super modern and funky, but like he's basing it on old Yiddish music, a lot of it, and he's melding that in. And so there's a lot of that. And some of the African music we book, some of it sounds super funky and it doesn't sound like it links to tradition. And some of it is really like, I think a lot of us have gotten into Tuareg music, and to me that's really it's traditional in the sense it's very localized. It very much comes from that culture. And so we book a lot of that. And to me it has to have that kind of root, even though you might not hear it immediately, but someone that has that history, like someone who's playing the blues, if they don't know who, Booker White is, I think, well, why are you playing blues? Why would I hire you? You don't even know who started this music, right? And with jazz, I feel like there's got to be something like, for instance, with authenticity, if I'm booking blues, I might book, if I say I have 5 blues artists, one of them might be white, but the rest are going to be black, because I figure I want the people who started that music. And I love in Canada that there's some melding, and there's, an African band that has some pasty Canadians like me in it. But you want there to be some kind of root or authenticity. So I think that's the root of most of what we do. And, folk is singer-songwriters. It's the history of telling stories. And so how are people telling their stories? And sometimes it's in a different language. But, we have a lot of singer-songwriters, and they're really welcome, but we're not just a singer-songwriter festival. So we're kind of like a mix of, say not Newport, but what's that singer-songwriter festival? You might be the best singer-songwriter in the country, but there's only 8 singer-songwriter spots, and now I'm looking for a blues artist, and I'm looking for someone like Blix, who have the polyphonic vocals, and they're 4 people, and they can just be on a stage and play all kinds of instruments, and so it's about all that variety. But I guess what I'm saying is that there's a lot of tradition at the root of it, and people might not see it as obviously, so I think we book a lot of traditional music.
Well, I think you even, you touched on the word authenticity, right? And like, I think that is such an important characteristic for any band or group or artist to be bringing, when they are performing their art on stage. And so, to know that you're all looking for, like, what is authentic? Like,
But we're all judging.
Yeah. But there's that authenticity because there's a lot of showmanship or showpersonship, in this industry. But at the end of the day, it's going to always be the authentic it factor that you bring, more than the costumes and the smoke and mirrors. So how are you finding the artists and the music for your festivals these days? Let's say like these days, maybe like let's pretend we're in 2019. But like, what's catching your eye? What are some of the go-to methods? Like, share the process of how you curate.
Well, I mean, it's interesting as you used the term artistic committee earlier. Well, like, I sort of look at it as like your artistic committee is sort of at large. So, I mean, to sit there and say that, oh, this all comes out of my head, that's ridiculous. It's
so chaotic.
It's so chaotic, it would just be like, I couldn't afford my own lineup. That would be the problem. But no, you listen to a lot of people. I mean, that's, you've been doing this long enough that it really does come down to paying attention to there's conversations that happen. There's you go to conferences, I work at a university, I'm listening to what some of the kids are talking about there. It comes from all over the place. And then, every now and then it's just like you hear something, you go, what the hell is that? But, to speak to something that's come up already, it's a real luxury to be able to program a music festival and actually get stressed out about it. Although there are moments where it's like, why did I? Anyway, but the fact that you can actually program as diverse of a lineup that we get to is really something, and it's a tribute to our audiences because the people who come to it are coming with this open mind. If you can take those chances, and because there's a whole other thing, and I'll say this as nicely as I can, where like there's a linear box where, we have dealt with this in the past, where somebody's going, what are you doing booking a punk rock band at your festival? It's like, what the hell's going on? It's like, well, it's not that type of a festival where it's only one style of music, so that's where you get a pretty wide thing to paint every year, and I will say in the last number of years, things go in cycles, and if you do something long enough, you see the same cycle come up again, where like, eventually what you're doing, some other people are going to start doing it around you, and it's like you open up a restaurant, it's like for a while, like, wow, this is the greatest thing, and then somebody opens one that's down the street, and they've got another little twist on it, and we live in an era, and I say this all the time, where Walmart has an organic section. So you can take that, and it applies, like anything can happen and be sold a certain way. So if you want to maintain your identity, that's where all the subtlety comes in.
Okay, so instead of giving your secrets as to how you're curating, finding new artists, I want to kind of follow up. You're all taking chances in your programming, and chance can sometimes be risk, right? So I'd love to know a story or an example of a time when you were really excited about a certain booking that you made, or certain artists or groups that you could acquire, but also felt maybe a little bit nervous in terms of bringing them onto the lineup. So something that really excited you, but one that you were maybe like a little nervous in terms of how it would go over with audience. Does anyone feel like sharing any type of example? But who knows, maybe they've all been very confident to be so lucky. But like something that you knew, like this is like, is this gonna go over? So Sam, when you booked Fucked Up, like were you like excited about this booking, or maybe a bit nervous as to how it would be perceived or received?
Well, obviously the name is the thing, so there was like, oh, we can't put that on the poster, and it'll be like, how many times do people say fuck at the festival? like, come on. But we did try to be respectful, you know, about not, you know, there's children and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it was a full-on, you know, the way they delivered their show.
Yeah.
And it was great. People loved it. The people who didn't want to be there, they didn't have to be there. They could be on the other side of the island listening to whatever, you know. So, I mean, that's part of what happens in situations like this. When you have multiple stages, right, you can have something that's completely in a different realm of music, and then you can have the opposite happening on the other side of the festival for the people that don't care to see that.
Yeah. What about you, Peter? What about something that you were like pushing a boundary, you're really excited, but also maybe a little bit nervous as to how it would be received?
I mean, I agree with saying that I think there are so many stages, and that I'm never really worried about how, you know, like sometimes I know that I'm going to book something and I know there's going to be 20, 30 people doing it, but it's an artist that I think is really important, maybe has a history, and they're touring, and I think it's really important to support, even though it might be something super avant-garde and niche, but I still think it's important, right? Even though it's going to be a money loss, but I think, I mean, when you ask stuff that I'm nervous about, it's more financial. It's more like when you book like Robert Plant and you see a thunderstorm coming, and you're outside and you know you're going to lose like $70,000 or something. Those are the nerve-wracking moments. It's not it's, you know, it's like occasionally there's been political things where you book something and then there's some political, you know, outrage against the country, and you booked a bunch of those artists, and you have to deal with the media. That's kind of stressful, but yeah, there's those things. You just deal with it. It's not going to stop. You know, you're not political. We're not doing this for political reasons. So, and that's usually the response to those kind of problems.
Carrie, any story of any time that?
I mean, and I was going to say booking is an art and a science for me. It's like what's really exciting, and then also, you know, how many of different genres do you have, and the balance of genders and all that stuff. And then even in terms of finding, I was going to say we hunt some people down and they hunt us down, and it's, you know, what you hear on the radio and what you see, and it's those artists that really excite you. Sometimes you're in this business for so long, you feel cynical, like you maybe don't like music anymore, and then you see something amazing, a real spark. I think the mistakes, like, we're kind of the same, where, like, I'll climb up on main stage. I had Arto Lindsay on main stage, and it was great. It probably didn't appeal to a ton of people, but people can go to the beer garden, or they can go to the other stage, and we have the privilege in the evening of having the two different stages, so I can put, when we have put Fucked Up on our Twilight stage, and there's 3,000 people watching, and then we have something more on the other. I think the regrets are more bad behavior regrets, like people who, or like, I must say, there was one artist, and she was lovely. I'm going to say, I booked the X, and I was so excited. It's John Doe and Exene Cervenka. I was so excited. And it turns out John Doe was in he pulled out because he was in an indie film. And Exene was the loveliest human. She was wonderful, but she really could only sing 3 songs without having an accompanist. And had she said, like, I can't play an instrument, I would have found someone locally to play with her. But people were just like, oh, I hear that song one more time. But she was lovely. Michelle Shocked, I could tell probably a whole half an hour story about how difficult she was. And but it was more the behavior was really bad. You know, there's the odd artist you booked. There was a local artist, I can't remember her name, where her CD it's the opposite. Most people are better live than on record, but she was really great live and not good. Really great on CD, but not great live. And you know, like Macy Gray was a whole other story. And you know, some of the ones where it's a bad behavior, you kind of regret. But musically, I haven't had a lot of failure where people went, you know, what the hell was that? Because I figure if everyone likes it, then you're basically elevator music. Like, you're not offending anyone. You're not exciting anyone. You're not offending anyone. Even like Bonnie Prince Billy's played twice, and he's so great. But the second time, it was really weird because he basically had fortune cookie lyrics. And he played, like, it was a very strange show, and some people thought it was brilliant and some people didn't. We had Esperanza Spalding. It doesn't appeal to everyone. Like, it was main stage. It was maybe not an obvious main stage, and it wasn't for everyone, but we didn't get a really blowback. And there's some people, like, there's an audience member that Macy Gray shows, like, it wasn't very good. You shouldn't pay her whole fee. It's like, well, we don't have the option to say, oh, yeah, I only liked a third of your show, so here's a third of your fee.
It's a good thing you weren't doing pass the hat in that
Yeah.
for that set, right?
So it's more just the people whose behavior is bad or their show is a bit disappointing. Or if you, like, some people might have a musical hero and even as an artistic director or audience member, and then you hire them and they're jerks, and people think, you kind of get this bad taste in your mouth. That kind of thing. But yeah, musically, like, we've been able to stretch, and I've had a lot of leeway. And the different stages where people put people. Like, we had Tanya Tagad one time, and it was near the family area. It just happened that's the stage she was on. And one woman said she was having an orgasm on stage near the family area. It's like, that's not an orgasm. That's actually throat singing. And you know, like, you get the odd person that, you know, complains like that. But it was more the placement of where we had her performing. And then now we have the Twilight stage, and I put someone like Tanya there rather than me. So it's just about where you put people, and I think we all have a number of different stages. Like I said, the bad behavior one's actually quite hilarious. Sometimes they're hilarious stories after, but you kind of think, never hiring them again.
So we only have a couple more minutes, so I'm going to have to kind of do lightning round questions. So to follow up in terms of the behavior, maybe the to-dos and not to-dos, what is one tip that you could give an emerging or new to your market artist, like coming to the festival? Like one little nugget of advice, like, hey, if you're coming to the festival, keep this in mind. Sam?
You know, like coming to perform.
Like
for the first time.
they're an artist coming to perform at the festival. What would you tell an emerging artist or maybe new to the market? So maybe someone from BC performing in Guelph for the first time. One little piece of advice you would give them?
Well, if they were coming to play at our festival, that's like one of the things that we're really proud of is how artists that nobody knows walk out on stage and they get this response of like they can't believe it. They put on the sense of their lives. So, you know, that's happening over and over and over again. That's because you've got this audience. So I would say to them, you know, your nervousness about coming and walking out onto stage, just be aware that the audience is very receptive to hearing.
That's beautiful. What a beautiful piece of advice. Like, hey, you're going to be loved. Peter?
I would say be yourself and play as though your life depended on it.
Although we love you, but don't suck.
No, it's not really that bad. It comes down to that authenticity. Like the groups that I love and that I'm going to keep inviting back are the ones that really play as though this is the last day they're going to play, and they're telling their story. It's not like they're looking in on themselves. This is now, and you're singing and you're playing now. Just do it.
Carrie, what's a piece of advice, a little nugget for an emerging or new to your market performer?
Well, don't call it a showcase. You're at a festival. You're playing a show. Some people say, I want to showcase. Like, it's not a showcase. It's just, relax and embrace the atmosphere and try and be there and be fully there. Like at our festival, some people are like, I really want to play your festival. I'm going to come in for one day and I just want to play this one stage and I want to sell my CDs. Like, then you don't want to play a festival. You want to play a concert. We're offering you a large audience. Come and embrace it. Be willing to collaborate. Embrace the collaborative sessions. Look at who else is playing. And be there for as long as you can, because it's like summer camp for musicians. You get to be there, you get to hang out with other people. You're going to do some media interviews. Maybe you're going to go do a live set on CJSW or CKWay. Like, really embrace the experience and be as open-minded as you can. And also leading up, be organized and communicate. And, some of the best people to book are people without agents and managers who are just really, really organized and communicate with you. And you can say, hey, if artists say to me, I'd love to be on a collaborative stage with this person, feel free to say that, and I'll do my best to accommodate. I can't, maybe he isn't doing a workshop or something, but if you're a local artist or emerging artist and you really love to play with someone or you're friends with someone else and you play well with them, tell me, because that'll help me program you better.
Do all of you have online submissions up on your website for artists to apply for festival opportunities? Yes, no?
Yes, just for local artists.
Local, okay. Peter, anyone, everyone?
Yeah, anyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carrie?
Not really. I mean, people can send an email. There's no official submission.
Yeah.
But people can send an email and just say, hey, I'm interested. Put your name in the header. Be really clear. We probably book 0 artists from just a cold kind of thing like that, but maybe it builds on reminding me that you saw in a showcase, or I heard your song on CKUA or CBC, and then you're hitting home to me, and it's that very day that I'm looking for a Balkan party band, or a klezmer band, or a Zydeco band, and you happen to be that person. So all those things, but just tour lots, get really good at what you do, get played, make sure your album is released and played on as much radio as possible, and make sure it's out there. Because the festival isn't going to be what breaks you. Often we're hearing of you because you're all in those places, and then we decide to book you. We're not necessarily the first place.
Yeah. Anytime you have a chance to be at a festival, whether it's as an attendee or as a performer, take it. It is never going to be a bad time. And on that though, we have to end this good time. So I'd like to ask everyone to quickly share with us your 2022 festival dates. So Sam, when is Hillside coming back for 2022?
It's 22 to 24
July 22, 24, 2022. Peter, Ottawa Jazz.
June 24th to July 3.
And Carrie?
Same dates as Sam, add the Thursday on, and then you can watch Sam and I arm wrestle over artists. It's very fun.
That'll be next year's conference. It'll just be a big jello bowl.
That was our first conversation. Sam phoned me and I said, stop stealing my artists. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so this is like in 2 minutes here. So what happened is that when I started doing this, you know, this is artists that I kept on trying to book, and it's like, well, they're playing in Calgary. Well, they're playing in Calgary. Well, who the hell is this person in Calgary that's stealing all the artists? So I can't remember, it was like who it was, and it's like, okay, that's it. I'm picking up the phone. So I pick up the phone, I call their office, and can I speak to Carrie Clark? And who's calling? This is Sam from the Hillside Festival. Oh, I think she'd be interested in talking with you. And I said, when we got on the phone, it's like, and I don't even know exactly what our exchange was, but I think at the beginning it was like, we couldn't get mad, but there was something pretty obvious that we had similar tastes, but it was like, okay, now we gotta work together. And we haven't really looked back.
Oh, I'm so angry. Stop being my best friend.
Yeah.
Stop having good taste.
I want to thank everybody who has attended this panel. I want to say thank you to Block for giving us an opportunity. Again, this was presented by Folk Alliance International, so thank you, Carrie, Calgary Festival. Thank you, Peter from Ottawa Jazz, and Sam from Hillside Music Fest.
Thanks to Lula for hosting us.
I just wanted to give a shout out and a big thanks to Canada Heritage and Factor and all of our funders, St. Vlad's, the Shevchenko Foundation, for supporting the conference. And this panel is actually brought to you by Trade Routes, a company that I helped start with Mark. Nikki is around also on the board. I'll go on. I'll let Eli and Pete introduce themselves. We're going to talk about block booking, and we'll go into that exactly.
But we're going to dissect the block show. We're going to talk about who booked it.
Exactly. How you built your network.
Oh, my network. I thought you meant we were going to dissect block, like the festival.
Yeah.
Well,
I wouldn't block shows that.
do their book.
So Eli, explain yourself.
Hi, my name is Eli. I'm from Montreal. I am here representing Mondial Montreal, which is a conference and showcase event that happens in November in Montreal. We've been doing it for about 10 years. 10 and a half because the pandemic obviously prevented us from doing a full edition. Yeah, so I'm sure what Mondial is will come up a bit during the conversation, so I will leave it at that. But it's been a real pleasure to be here and to experience the community that you guys have built. So respect for that.
My name is Pete Spinda. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's kind of weird to say right now, but I started in 2005 a dance party called Pandemic. And
That's right.
yeah,
Play that, guys.
yeah.
No, he's a visionary.
Yeah, so the idea was some friends and I were collecting world music, and in Pittsburgh the dance scene was really just club music or nothing, and we decided to use an alternative space and create a space that was inclusive to everybody. And with that, we all had kind of our different interests, and we mixed, Latin, Balkan, Afrobeat, music from all around the globe, and kind of mixed this folk electronic hybrid. The idea was you come and it's infectious, but yeah. And then at the end of 2018, no, end of 2019, or right before the pandemic happened.
Previously.
I decided to take a break from the dance party because I'd been doing it for 15 years nonstop, and bringing in bands like Lemon Bucket and various other groups from around the world. And then the pandemic hit in March, so that was kind of a bummer. But people tend to blame the pandemic on me, so keeping the name Pandemic, and then they put it on my name, which I was like, I'm here for a festival. The festival's called Petonkatonk. It's a play on the honk festivals. If you're not familiar, it's the convergence of street bands from different cities, kind of merging on one city and performing in different parts, activating space. So it's Pittsburgh honk with a booty, as I was told. So it's Petonk, a tonk, like honky tonk. Anyway, yeah, so I've been doing that for about 8 years as well, and it's a free community festival.
Okay, so most people know me here. My name's Mike Lowen. I'm on the team, the block team, but I also am an agent, touring artists around the world. Before the pandemic, I started to talk to presenters about cooperation and how they did it and how they didn't do it, what sort of support they needed. And I sort of came to the conclusion that there needed to be an organization devoted to cooperation. Everybody sort of wanted more of it, needed more of it, but didn't have the capacity to do it. And nobody's mandate was to cooperate. So I started Trade Routes. As I mentioned earlier, Mark and Nikki are on the board, as a few other agents and artists. And the goal is to develop infrastructure to support sustainable careers for artists and presenters. And if you've ever toured an artist, it's very costly. If you're presented an artist, there's a lot of risk on the table. And the purpose of cooperation is to share the risk. To make sure that we have successful shows with less risk, so that there's a larger community that gets built around this sort of interaction and cooperation. And so that's what we've been focusing on, building networks and trying to just get presenters to collaborate and talk. Of course, that's very difficult now because we haven't had shows. And so over the last month or so, we've been doing presenter meetings and talking to people. One of my favorite questions is, do you have any shows booked? And finally, over the last month or so, people say, yes, I have this. Of course, limited capacity, as we all know, but it's sort of a mandate to begin the process. I know as we come out of the pandemic, we really need to figure out how to cooperate better. And so before the pandemic, I started a little group, a focus group with 4 American presenters and 4 Canadian presenters, and then asked them, well, how can we support you? Where do you need the support? And they also belong to other networks, performing arts networks, festival networks, and so I sort of cherry-picked all their brains and figured out the rules of engagement to sort of help make a network work. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to these gentlemen is I hadn't talked to Pete about this actually, and I hadn't talked to Mundial, even though they're like down the road. And so they have established process on block booking, Mundial actually, and before the pandemic, Pete actually pulled the network together, 15, 16 presenters, got put in a spot and kind of was forced to sort of do it, and then was the pandemic hit. I just think that this was a really potent network. It's the promoters right below the institutional sort of framework, and these are really important. You keep calling them the stepping stones, right? Like you're that stepping stone, and I think there's a lot of validity in that, and that's really where the community is. You know, and it's so that's why I wanted to have both of you here. Like this is the community sort of network, and with Mundial they have a very established presenter network. And so I'm going to ask both of you these types of questions, and yeah, please let me know how it works and how you develop it. So I'll start with Mundial being the most established. So if you could explain your presenter process, the presenter process. I'm sorry, like how you build and go through that.
Sure. So. For those of you that are not aware, one of the important components of Mundial is that we've been developing a pan-Canadian network of presenters, as well as some American presenters and people from Europe. And they come to Mundial and they've been having meetings, private meetings among themselves to discuss issues, topics, block booking, just the realities of the presenter environment. And that's been happening since the beginning of Mundial. So there's been a lot of information sharing, collaboration, and then obviously, like you saw with the previous panel, there's presenters already talk to each other, but we try to, create a space where they can really, get down to work and speak freely about, topics that only they might actually, that concern presenters that they can't really talk about with their staff necessarily or with artists. So we've been doing that, and it was set up in large part by Derek Andrews. So shout out. And then yeah, like it involves a lot of different levels of presenters. So there's festivals, there's institutional presenters like cultural centers, and larger. There's the different types of venues. So it brings together a lot of different people from different regions and different kind of presenting concerns. Which what we've seen is that there's a lot of information sharing, and people that might have different concerns that they might have a lot of affinities in their approaches, and there's a lot of sharing of good ideas. So that's kind of what we've been fostering for a while, and then
we always kind of see this in Gary and Sam earlier. I'm not sure they're still here, but like how they over years you develop a relationship with people. Yeah. And I guess this is really what this is about, is relationships. And what I've learned is that I've talked to lots of presenters going to Mundial, and they all love it. The fact that they can eat with people, they can learn about what other presenters go through, that they're not alone in presenting. Mm-hmm. And I think that what I've learned through the focus group is there's sort of 3 pillars of the network. And there's the information sharing, hard, straight-up information sharing. And then there's the professional development side of it, like learning how to manage COVID, as an example. And then just the people aspect of it. I've had many businesses. It doesn't matter what business you're in. We're all in the people business. And if we have good relationships with our neighbors, with Mundial, Montreal down the road, it's just going to make a stronger community and better audiences and serve the audience.
Yeah. And just to add one little thing about that is that one thing that we've seen at Mundial, we have the Quebec-Ontario connection, which has been interesting, but there's a lot of different networks in Canada of presenters, like we've heard all day. And at Mundial, we've seen them come together, so having networks talking to each other, it's like another level of it, of collaboration and communication, and it always benefits people to share their best ideas.
And so Pete, your network. How did you start your network?
Yeah, my network. I consider myself a music fan, and so
I would start looking at bands that I really liked and look at their routing, and it was like, oh, they're playing in New York, they're playing in Chicago, you know, and then they're playing Toronto, but they're not coming to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's a small network, or small market city, so a lot of bands look over us, and then I just started reaching out to people and being like, hey, I'm a huge fan. I bought all these records. I have everything on your label. I see so-and-so is coming through Pittsburgh. Would you be interested in a show? And then they usually come back and say, we want $5,000. And I say, well, I do this little dance party where I have a cultivation of a couple hundred people that come out every time I do it. So instead of playing a small, or a club like this size with 15 people in it, you know, I can give you a smaller club with 200 people in it, and trust me, my audience will, you know, enjoy your band. And through that, I meet one person and then usually get bounced around from the agent, and then I generally dig a little bit and find that artist and be like, look, if you want a cool party in my town, I can throw that for you, but I can't give you $1,000 guarantee, thousands of dollars in guarantees of hotel rooms. You can crash on my floor, which we've done many, many times. Thank you to my wife for allowing that, like having 18 people sleep in our house at once, which is crazy. But through that, kind of just being honest and open and being a music fan, like, has allowed me to kind of slowly expand, because then the word travels. Oh, we went to this house in Pittsburgh, and this guy put us up in his house, but there was this crazy party that 200 people came out to, and we sold a bunch of merchandise. And the pay wasn't that bad at the end of the day, but, you know, as a small independent promoter, take a lot of financial risks, and oftentimes you're like, well, do I pay my mortgage, or am I going to have to pay the band this week? But through that, you know, and then eventually, like, as the party has kind of grown, kind of met people like Olivier Conan from Barbez, and then, you know, meeting Michael, and then, like, as the network has grown, because people hit me up about playing the party, slowly it's like, oh, now we're able to start thinking about piecing together a tour and, like, getting put on the routes for events.
The Los Muros thing really, I think, drove it home for me. And I think that's the story, I think, that really,
Oh, you want to hear?
God, that's what it is.
Well, so the Russo Chicha record came out, like in 2007 or 2008, something like that. And I became, like, kind of obsessed with Peruvian, cumbia Amazonica. And then, you know, Olivier brought in Los Wemblers, and I did a party for them in Pittsburgh, and it was like, no one's going to come, no one's going to come. 400 people showed up. And some people Peruvian, some people just kind of trusting the event. And then I was like, well, who else is still playing, like, from that, you know, 70s era of cumbia, and reached out to Los Muros and was like, I have this festival. We finally got a little bit of funding, and I'll spend all my funding on you. Would you be interested in coming to the States? And they were like, sure. And so, well, it took them 7 months of back and forth to officially say sure. But then when they were finally like, sure, the festival was in May, and they decided they were going to come in late February, which, if, you know, those of you that promote and do events are like, oh my God, you're going to come in like less than 3 months. And then they're like, well, we're going to set up our own festival tour, thinking they were going to get on the festival circuit. And then I had to quickly explain to them that's not how the festival circuits work. Because generally those are booked, like, we could be looking at next year's festival circuit, but not this year's festival circuit. So with that, I then started being like, well, if you need help, because their booking agent was like, no less than $5,000, full backline, hotels for everyone, you know, and it was just like, you're not going to get that. I was like, it's 3 months away, like, you're going to get a bunch of, like, dirt bag bars, but you're going to get a lot of really great record collectors like me who will buy your records, want to come, buy any merch you have, support the band, because they're getting to hear their heroes play. And so after some conversations back and forth with their manager, they were going nowhere. But then finally, Jorge's son, who does speak English, contacted me, because I don't speak Spanish, which is terrible for my business model, but reached out to me and was like, you know, like, they definitely want to come. Would you be interested in helping? And I was like, yeah, do you want me to rent a van? Like, what can I do? And they're like,
This is
whatever.
like 2 weeks before the show.
This is roughly about 2 months before the show, but leading up to 2 weeks of the show. So finally they're like, yes, we'll do it. Like, you could drive us around the States. And I was like, okay, cool. How many shows do you have booked? And they're like, we might have one other show. And I booked their plane tickets for like 2.5, 3 weeks in the States. And it's like, all right. So they're just going to hang out in Pittsburgh for 3 weeks. What am I going to do with them? So then I started reaching out to other similar parties and digging, you know, and just kind of like similar how you record collect. You start digging for who's throwing cool parties in different cities. And that's when I reach out, you know, to Michael, and Michael's like, oh, did you meet so-and-so from so-and-so, Hartford, right? And then I meet Rick from Hartford, and Rick's like, oh, do you know so-and-so, do you know Ito from Massachusetts? And I'm like, no. Well, him and Kyle have this thing called Audible, and they do this thing, and you should talk to them. So I get on the phone, and I start emailing people, and I'm like, these guys might think I'm crazy. And then they're like, holy shit, you're bringing Los Mirlos in like a month? And I'm like, yeah, we're just trying to piece things together. And then you're dealing with like, how much money are you gonna get, like, where are they gonna stay? And so that all kind of got dropped on me last minute. But it was super fun because my wife and I jumped in a van with these guys for 2.5 weeks and like played everywhere, from like the dirtiest little bars. Like we played this club in Cleveland called Now That's Class, which is the opposite of class. Like I've done it, like I love like dirtbag bars, like that's my place. Like I come from kind of like a punk rock background, and I'm like, okay, but we happen to be in Cleveland like a few weeks before the tour, and we were like, well, let's go check out Now That's Class. And we walked in, and she was just like, what the fuck? And like, I'm talking like, the booths are just ripped apart. Like, you're just like, definitely don't go to that place like during COVID. Like, but like, it was like, and I like dirty bars, and it was like intense. But then we ended up booking 17 shows in like 19 days, all through this kind of like word of mouth network where like Rick was like, call so-and-so from Cleveland, and we booked Cleveland. And I'm like, I don't know if Cleveland's gonna be what we're doing. But then we get to Cleveland and we walk into the place and there's like 200 people. And they have like old Peruvian ladies that are there, young punks with like, you know, their ears stretched and like neck tattoos. And everyone was like, it was the best show of the tour. You know, but then I got like offers in like Rhode Island to play like big halls, and then it's like gonna be this great party, and you get there and there's 20 people and I don't know, like it's 300, you know. This is gonna be rough. So anyway, but being able to bring them to the States was really fun because at first they did not trust me at all. And like after every show, like they would be like, kind of like judging me, and I was trying to explain to them in the van, I was like, look, it's not what you're used to in Peru, because your music now, because of Olivier and that Rusa Chicha record, like they're like kind of exploded your music here, and you're gonna find all these like dudes like me that just are record collectors that love you and will come out and bring all their friends, and it'll be this legendary like tour, but it's gonna not be the kind of tour that you're used to. You're not gonna be playing at festival stages for 3,000 people. And we ended up doing it and having a great time, and yeah, so I mean, I can keep talking about it and tell you all the trials and tribulations of getting pulled into rooms in the basement thinking you were gonna get beat up by some weird mafia because they were trying to stiff us for the door, or
Okay, but I have a question actually. When you were putting together this whole tour and you were meeting all these people,
right.
had you met? So how many of those? You said it was what, 17 shows?
17
how many of them
shows.
had you met before that, like in any capacity? How many of them were people that you just met specifically as a result of this need that you had?
It was a network. I mean, you know, I saw you at APAT. You introduced me to some people, and then I started like I saw David Chavez from Chicago, and he was like, "Oh, you should talk to so and so." And then like four of the maybe 15, 17 shows we did, I knew ahead of time, and then but I've gotten to know them all since then because I was realizing we're all booking the same bands all the time. And I was like, oh, Ram is there. Well, Ram's coming here, and then Ram's going there, and then like, oh, I know all these bookers. And now bands are like, well, where do we go? And I'm like, go to Now That's Class. Trust me, it's awesome. Yeah, but it was weird but then like through that I created a Facebook group, and it was just kind of like the DIY presenters, because a lot of what I do is like I take risks on bands that cultural institutions won't do because they want a lot of times, and no disrespect because I really appreciate a lot of the cultural institutions in Pittsburgh and in the States, but they check off demographic boxes, right? We've got an African artist, we've got a Latino artist, we've got something Eastern European or cultural, and okay, great, our festival's booked, but they're not really thinking about who they're booking or curating. And part of it is maybe out of necessity that they're just trying to check these boxes so they can report back to grants. But for me, it's like, well, I want to curate who I bring in, and I want to find people that are kind of that stepping stone, because once, like when I brought Mdu Mokhtar in 2018 for my festival, that was speaking of like the conversation earlier about like what were some risks you took as a festival organizer. Sorry for talking too much, just told me to shut up. So we'll get rambling. I had like 9 cups of coffee. So, but risks I took as far as a festival, I brought in Mdu Mokhtar, and I was like, Patalkatalk is known as a brass music festival, primarily Eastern European themed, but I started adding different elements, and I'm like, well, Emily Mokhtar is like a Tuareg guitar band, who's like relatively unknown, but he mesmerized this audience. Well, I was talking to the Andy Warhol Museum about it, and the Andy Warhol Museum was like, nah, he's not known enough. We're not going to book him. Well, a year later, Emily Mokhtar comes back, and the Andy Warhol Museum booked him, and then he sold out in the museum, which was like 400 or something, 450. And then he just recently played another venue and stepped up to the promoters of Pittsburgh and works with like a rock, like similar to like a Live Nation type of entity. And so my relationship with him was basically over. But I was used to like get that first step into those cultural institutions, which a lot of times they won't take on their own until they're validated, right? So like I validated the band because now, you know, thousands of people saw it the first time, enjoyed it, was, you know, a buzz.
And when the 17 other sort of presenters go on the Facebook group that you have brought me into, thank you. Do they refer bands to you? How's that? I recognize that it's really messed up. No, but before, I actually thought it was before when we saw each other at APEP that year. Like how have they referred more stuff? Have you been talking? Here was before that was.
Yeah, like I think we realized we're all working with the same artist, but it wasn't always making sense because it's like St. Louis to Pittsburgh, back to Chicago, over to New York, you know, down to Atlanta, then over to Detroit, and the routes just didn't make sense. And it's like, okay, let's just like pause for the cause for a second here and like think about how can we make this make sense for everyone? Because after doing that with Los Mirlos, where you're like, okay, 12-hour drive, you know, you're like, this doesn't make any sense because we're coming back here. And if it was just a little more, well, part of it was there was not a lot of lead time. But if we do think about it collaboratively, we could do more of a cultural exchange where you're like, okay, we're now planning a route for these artists that we all, as you know, curators and record collectors and crazy people, want to book. But now we collaborate. The answer, yes, we now all collaborate.
I'm curious on the presenters that attend Mondial. How have you seen their collaboration change over the last 10 years?
How has it changed over the last 10 years? That is well, I guess one thing that I've seen, I guess, a little bit more, because there was already quite a lot of collaboration, but now it seems that there's just a greater understanding between the presenters of like their preferences and like we saw with the sharing artists and the conversations. But one thing that I did want to mention about this collaboration that I've seen is that it allows them to take more risks, you know, and it's not just the financial risk, it's the curation risk. They can really try to, you know, open up the opportunities. And so one thing that we've seen a lot is that there's been like this explosion of, particularly like with the indigenous music explosion that happened recently, just seeing the fact that the presenters are willing to take more and more risks with their programming because they know that they're not doing it by themselves. So that's been something that's just been kind of progressively increasing, where it also can come back to the artists too, because artists feel like they might be able to try the craziest, wildest idea that they were doing just like on Saturday afternoon when they're not preparing for their show. They can try things. So I feel like the ability to take creative risks is something that has kind of increased over time with Mondial, especially as people get to know more regional artists and just be a little bit more aware of the local communities. And there's like, I can't think of a better metaphor, and I don't like it, but it's the pipeline. There's more and more pipelines from like the stepping stones to the larger institutions, and there's more collaboration between them. They can take more risks.
Yeah, risk is a word that I mentioned off the top, and this is the point of collaboration, is to reduce that risk, present more shows, and have a more robust audience. And you brought up a bunch of times this risk. We're all taking risks as arts presenters, so I think collaboration, I think we all know it's the way forward. Frankly, it's the only way out of COVID. You know, with reduced capacity, these shows don't make financial sense. And so, you know, it's going to be some time before we get there, I feel. And, you know, collaboration is the only way to kind of out of it.
And one just to build on that, one thing that like we've been talking a lot about this over the weekend, and it's something that I've also just in talking with almost every presenter who comes to Mondial, there's there's collaboration built into it where there's collaboration with the community, and there's been, especially with the conversations around slow touring and things like that, there's more and more collaboration that is, I guess you could call it horizontal, where it's not just collaborating with, you know, your direct peer, the other club promoter, but there's been, like we've been talking about when you brought Sono Pepera and you brought them to the schools, and there's those levels of collaboration also that are just contributing to that larger network of presenters.
Yeah, well, I can speak to that for a second. So one of the things that we do with Patonk and actually Lemon Bucket was a part of it in 2019. And I started in 2015, was when I would book bands just like on a regular gig, you know, like it was a pandemic party, but the band's coming to play. I started partnering with local schools and bringing that band into a high school or elementary school to give the kids and, you know, especially like the musicians, we work with a specific like high school band in an underserved neighborhood. And the idea was that a lot of these kids, because I was working in the neighborhood at the time for a community center, that they'd never experienced live music. And it was like, well, I've got this cool opportunity. I can bring in like Lemon Bucket Orchestra to play for these kids. It's like this high school band. And like, you know, we're talking about a band where students are sharing saxophones. I know this is weird to talk about again during COVID. I keep bringing it up. But like they were like sharing instruments, like in like they didn't have a whole lot of resources. And the music teacher is not only like trying to like get them to be able to play for like the pep rally or like the football game or basketball game, but they're also trying to train each kid who's like a 7th or 8th grader or 10th grader who wants to now play the trumpet. Well, she's not a trumpet player. She's like probably a piano teacher that like, you know, studied education and is now thrown in this position. So these kids have like little to no training. But by bringing artists like Lemon Bucket in, what we were able to do was then have the trumpet players pick out with the horn players, have like the music, the percussionists go play with the percussionists, and think about doing like not only like having Lemon Bucket perform, but also then doing these kind of breakout sessions where the kids were actually getting an opportunity to meet musicians who were living and like working as professional musicians in their instrument. And it like what we found when we've been doing this over the years was like kids learn how to like maintain their instruments. They gain more confidence in playing. They like multiple kids went on to like, win honors band awards. Stowe Rock's marching band started getting like, you know, accolades for like their just them as a high school marching band. And then as that grew too, like the kids started getting introduced to different types of music. So we brought like Bogart in, and he did like his hip hop set, and the kids were like, "You can rap over Latin music? This is weird." And it's like, no, it's so cool, and it's also like multilingual. So then you start talking about like who speaks what where, and like those were conversations that are often foreign to the kids, no pun intended. But like that allowed like not only the performers to like, you know, create an audience through the performance in a club, but then also go in and start talking to kids in schools, and then it creates a buzz within the band community. And then the next time the band comes in, more kids are kind of cutting class and start jumping into band class, and then they can't.
So it's grown. The band has actually grown, but then it also creates like these community connections. So then I go to like a restaurant in the neighborhood, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're the guy who keeps bringing all these bands to this neighborhood," and I'm like, "Yeah." Well, then like they start coming to the festival and start participating in the festival and feel ownership because they're like, "Oh yeah, they were just in our school, like they were just here," and so. Like they actually still ask about you. They told me to say hi, Crystal specifically, and Lamont specifically. But they want, like they're asking, when can Lemon Bucket come back? When can Lemon Bucket come? So I brought Sonra Papera from Mexico City to Patonka a few weeks ago, and we took them to the school, and the kids were just like amazed. So yeah, anyway.
The term horizontal collaboration, and I think of the vertical collaboration. This is what this is. I see. The horizontal one is really easy. The pipeline. You know this other promoter, this DJ. It's easy to collaborate. You have similar tastes like some of the other presenters. But the vertical one is what I mean by that is like a small one-time event to an institution that has 30 or 300 shows a year. But that's a hard thing to collaborate. Like, what were the biggest challenges to do that? Like incorporating a one-off, or like just somebody has such separate goals, like a school to a festival. Like any experience that what was the biggest challenge in trying to line that up? Because I've talked to other presenters, and that's hard to do. It's hard to together, to match those two, square those circles.
Well, I mean, like there's the larger networks, right, where it can be more complicated like that. But then I think that collaboration, because there's collaboration on so many different levels, and I guess that the collaboration that's more on the local level is something that it's, you know, you're building the community versus coming to like the presenter networks, where that's sharing much more specific information about the artistic goals and needs and I guess budgets as well. But it's just a different form of collaboration, you know, and like and that comes from being involved in your community and not just thinking in terms of like you know, being a node on a network or being a route, but actually like what do we have here and what are we building together, you know, like that's something that I know that in most of the communities where there's the presenters that are in the World Roots Network, that's the presenter network at Mondial, that's what it's called. That's something that they've been growing over time, and that's also helped them to get to the point where they're able to be part of a national network where it's relevant, you know? So I guess, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's,
No, like I said,
there's some words that
what I've
came
heard is
after
it's
your
just
question.
challenging to make these connections come together, particularly when, like you said, the Warhol Museum.
Right.
How is your relationship? It's improving. Like this is a symbiotic relationship. Like you mentioned the other day that they brought you in to do some promoting.
Yeah, I mean, I do, I guess, a lot of vertical collaborations. Everything from the Andy Warhol Museum, which this goes back to like 2005. I was actually working there as an artist educator, and I was not involved in like the programming, but I saw the Kanono #1 was coming, and I talked to the person who was in charge of programming, and he's like, well, we might have to cancel the show. And I was like, why is that? And he's like, because we only sold like 7 tickets. I was like, wait, what? 7 tickets? Do you know who this band is? And he's like, well, yeah, I know who the band is, but we're just not getting the word out. It's like, well, because their method of promoting, and I'm not just like shit talking like about them, but it's just like there was like a standardized method of promoting, and this is why I think that I've been successful in what I do, is because I put my heart and soul into it. I run around town hanging up posters, much like Mark and Marichka and the whole block community has been doing all week, because I see them everywhere, which is amazing. But I would be that person doing that, and so I decided to take it upon myself to kind of help. And I was just like, let me do this. And so I literally ran around town, put up posters, started talking to record collectors, and then they ended up selling out like 350 seats, and this was like within a week. And it was just because it was like, look, let me like kind of jump in. And then since then, like every time they book a band, they're like a world music band, or what they would just reach out to me and like, hey, well, like we want you to be a collaborator, like we'll co-present it with us, because with my brand, it's not about necessarily, like I don't book everything, like I say no to more things than I actually probably should, but I try to keep it curated and tight, and with that, like people trust what I do. But as far as like the vertical like collaboration, I also, like when Lemon Bucket was here, and I'm using Lemon Bucket a lot, but it happens with multiple bands, I'm just using to give you a frame of reference. Yes. Like we played a Croatian hall in Pittsburgh, because we have so many Eastern Europeans that are there, but a lot of these old facilities are closing. So there's like a Serbian club, a Rusin club, multiple Croatian clubs, you know, a Slavic center, Polish, you know, Falcons, and all these, you know, various like clubs. Well, a lot of them are dying, and I've always wanted to kind of try to rejuvenate those by like putting in bands that, you know, I think a lot of people would go see in these bands. So we collaborated with the Croatian club, and they were, I think, not expecting Lemon Bucket to stand on tables and like really, like they were expecting kind of like the normal like kind of Tamburitsin kind of folk dancing what the kids do, you know, like because that's what it's become diluted to in Pittsburgh. I grew up with that, so I know. There, like the idea of like a lively Croatian party was kind of like, oh, that's what we do kind of after the parties are done at the hall. So collaborating with them though got a lot of their members to like then first a lot of people that came to that party then bought memberships to the club, which infused money into that club, but then also, and the result, a lot of those clubs now want to work with Patonkatonk or with me to like, because they want that activity again, because they're not getting it, because a lot of what they're doing is kind of really just limited to like the youth dance ensembles and like their occasional bingo night or pierogi night or whatever. But thinking about that as a way like, oh, well now these people not only like these people, it sounds weird, but these clubs, like, and people that work in these clubs are now, and these families that belong to these clubs are now coming to my events and like participating in those and want to actively participate. So it's been cool to see that. Like when Son Rampapera, if I'm talking too much, just shut me up. But when Son Rampapera was here, I brought them from Mexico City. They were doing like a little stint in the States. And I was like, well, I have some education grants, so I can kind of house you for a week. But we're going to do a bunch of different things. So we took them to the high school, and then there was a local Latino community or organization called Casa San Jose that does a lot of immigrant and refugee like activism for immigrants and refugees in Pittsburgh, helping with placement, jobs, other things. They were doing a back to school event, and I was like, well, I could, maybe we could program some music because they were interested in music. And I was like, well, Song Rampa Pera is going to be here. We could collaborate on that. So we took them. They're like, if you haven't heard them, they're going to be the next big thing. They're fucking incredible, like marimba.
Marimba, rockabilly, punk rock.
Yeah.
Punk rockabilly.
Yeah. Cumbia is the new punk, is like their T-shirt, and like, I think they would go great with Lemon Bucket again, another Lemon Bucket drop. But so I brought them and they did the high school thing, and then we went to that event, and like they set up to perform, and they did their cumbia set, and like there's hundreds of people there, lots of little kids running around, and they're kind of dancing, they're kind of paying attention. Well, the band has been playing so many shows over the past month that we're like, well, I found out that they're all like in punk bands, and one's like an Elvis impersonator, and like they have this like cool stuff that they do on the side. So they just started swapping instruments and just started playing this like 60s surf rock set, and everyone just erupted in it. There's like hundreds of people just doing like the 60s kind of like, I don't even know what the dance is called, the like twisting and waving around, and it was just kind of incredible. But then but it's like that kind of, they were like, this made the night, it was so fun, like it activated our space. Sorry, I'm talking to you.
No. I wanted to ask about the Croatian Hall. Was there a network there that existed? Like, were they connected outside of Pittsburgh? Was there a local friendliness?
No, we went for Chivapi night because we saw they had Chivapi dinner and decided to like go to get Chivapi, and then I was like, this would be kind of a cool spot to put Lemon Bucket or one of the bands in. And then I went up to the lady and was like, hey, I want to become a member. And she's like, great. I bought membership, and then I was like, can I book a show here? And she's like, what kind of show? And that night she was like when Lemon Bucket like kind of like erupted, and there's people dancing around. They had like a bar island, and people were like circle dancing around the bar. She was losing her mind, yelling at Mark, get off the table, get off the tables, but then like the next day she was like, that was actually amazing, can you book more stuff here?
That's great, because it'd be great to see you connect with other. And I bring it up just because we're talking about a small community here with Block. This is a Slavic community, and being that vertical sort of cooperation is how do we get those community groups and volunteer organizations to connect with you, a stepping stone, and Andy Warhol or the Warhol Museum? Like how does that work?
And with festivals, right? Like that's something that it's
or the performing arts.
There's so many opportunities there that for the bands and for all the organizations to really to just create more, to enhance the culture of their city, because that's really what everybody's trying to do, right? And they just have maybe sometimes different needs and different values, but there's I've noticed it especially in Montreal, because that's where I would notice such things, but I've seen that there's a need for more communication, especially when it comes to community organizations, because there's great artists that are being found by the institutional presenters or promoters who might have their interests, but then there's also incredible artists that the community organizations are super tapped into, that there's a great crossover potential, but because there's less conversations happening around it, there's just missed opportunities and for everybody involved, and it comes down to just the conversation, having the conversation, going to Chivapi nights, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, we had a Chivapi night last night.
We did. And the night before.
Yeah. So any tips on how to improve that vertical cooperation? As a closing remark, we got a few minutes.
That's a good one. I guess part of it is just reaching out. Like I see there's posters all the time, and like you go to the Latin the hairdresser, and they have the show with the very well-known artist from Colombia that could easily be playing at the Jazz Fest, but they're not. And I guess part of it is making the effort of reaching out, but also on the other side of it, it's also like listening to when people reach out, because it should work both ways. It's not up to one group of people the onus shouldn't be on one group of people to reach out. It should just be understood that
Two-way street.
yeah, you got to reach out, but you also have to read the person's email or pick up the phone and be willing to take the time to get to know them a little bit, because you never know where it's going to go. So I guess that's how I would see it.
More
But making the
communication.
effort and seeing it as something that's worth doing.
Right. I mean, I found that maybe providing the service and reaching out and offering something without asking for something in return, and just hoping it comes back to you, it's like good karma shit.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's just,
It goes a long way.
and I think it really does. I think that's, I mean, one, I'm very persistent, so like I kind of don't, like if I put my mind to something, it happens regardless of risk into relationships or finances or whatever. Because
Passion.
I'm stubborn. Yeah, I'm passionate about things. But a lot of times too, it's just like, hey, the Croatian Hall, like I didn't ask anything from them other than, can I rent your space? So like bring in people and the same with like Casa San Jose. Like, look, I want to give also the artists an opportunity to like play in different settings too, because I'm sure after a while, big stages are great, but like you have those moments where you're just like the band after they played that, like switched and played the rockabilly set, we're just like, that was so fun. We haven't done that in so long because we're so used to getting on stages and sound checking in the same way and then eating the same pizza and Chinese food. Like we wanted something different, and it gave them that different experience. And then the next night when they played Tonk Tonk, it was like keep your brain from rolling out your ears kind of experience.
Okay, so takeaways are reach out and don't expect something, offer something.
Yeah, just be nice.
Olive branch, right?
Be nice.
Olive branch, yeah, there you go.
Wait, so where I'm going to end up the panel here, is there any questions from any of the presenters? I'm so curious. As I mentioned in my meetings, any presenters actually presenting shows, books, shows? We all need to collaborate more as we get this out of COVID. So I want to thank Eli. Thank you. Pete.
Thank you, Michael.
I appreciate all the insight, sharing.
And congrats to everyone from Block for putting such an amazing weekend
Yeah.
together. So it's been awesome.
I'm really happy everyone could make it out, and yeah, it means a lot to all of us, the entire team. So thank you all. Come back next year.
Cheers.